Ramananda. January the 1st. So we would like to invite you to come. Srila Prabhupada, it is your temple. You have asked Krishna to come there. When we all gave up, you carried on the fight. Yes, that was a great fight, said Prabhupada, smiling. After so much fighting, and then to construct a big temple was a great triumph. I don't think Krishna will come into the temple, said Tamal Krishna, unless you are personally there. Srila Prabhupada to open the door. Prabhupada was still smiling. All right, he said, but chanting should not be stopped. Things should go on naturally. What's that noise? On its last legs, is it? Turning to Kirtananda, Prabhupada asked, Kirtananda's palace, when will it be ready? In early spring, Kirtananda replied, as soon as the weather is a little warmer, it gives you the chance to have a little time to recuperate, then go to Bombay and open the temple there. And then you can come open your palace. We have about 75 letters from all the devotees in New Vrindavan, and they're all begging for you to come. They say their life is finished if you don't come. So let me take a little rest, said Srila Prabhupada, and then I shall take strawberries. They're trying to pressurize Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Written from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 10-20, entitled Structure of the Universe, starting from text 6, is it? Is that right? Okay, so there's quite a few verses here without any purports and a lot of Sanskrit, so I'm just going to go through the translations until we get to the verse with the purport in it. O King, longevity, sensory prowess, physical and mental strength, intelligence and bravery are naturally and equally manifested in all the inhabitants of the 5 islands headed by Lakshadweep. Lakshadweep is surrounded by an ocean of sugarcane juice equal in breadth to the island itself. Similarly, there is another island, Shalmalidweep, twice as broad as Lakshadweep, 400,000 yojanas or 3,200,000 miles, and surrounded by an equally broad body of water called Surasagara, the ocean that tastes like liquid. On Shalmalidweep, there is a Shalmali tree from which the island takes its name. That tree is as broad and tall as a Pratyaksha tree. In other words, 100 yojanas, 800 miles broad, and 1100 yojanas, 8,800 miles tall. Learned scholars say that this gigantic tree is the residence of Garuda, the king of all birds, and carrier of Lord Vishnu. In that tree, Garuda offers Lord Vishnu in his Vedic prayers. Son of Maharaj Priyavrata, named Yagibahu, the master of Shalmalidweep, divided the island into 7 tracts of land, which he gave to his 7 sons. The names of those divisions, which correspond to the names of the sons, are Surochana, Somanasya, Ramanaka, Devavarsha, Paribhadra, Apyayan, and Avigyata. In those tracts of land there are 7 mountains, Swarasa, Shatashringa, Vamadev, Kunda, Mukunda, Pushpavarsha, Sahasrashruti. There are also 7 rivers, Anumati, Sinivali, Saraswati, Kuhu, Rajani, Nanda, and Raka. They are still existing. Strictly following the cult of Varnashram Dharma, the inhabitants of those islands, who are known as Shrutidars, Viryadars, Vasundars, Ishandars, all worship the expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead named Soma, the moon god. The inhabitants of Shalmalidweep worship the demigod of the moon in the following words. By his own rays, the moon god has divided the month into 2 fortnights. known as Shukla and Krishna, for the distribution of food grains to the Pitas and demigods. The demigod of the moon is he who divides time, and he is the king of all the residents of the universe. We therefore pray that he may remain our king and guide, and we offer him our respectful obeisances. Outside the ocean of liquor is another island known as Kusa, which is 800,000 yojanas, 6.4 million miles wide, twice as wide as the ocean of liquor. As Shalmali is surrounded by a liquor ocean, Kusa is surrounded by an ocean of liquid ghee as broad as the island itself. On Kusa there are clumps of Kusa grass, from which the island takes its name. This Kusa grass, which was created by the demigods by the will of the Supreme Lord, appears like a second form of fire, but with very mild and pleasing flames. Its young shoots illuminate all directions. Srila Prabhupada's purport. From descriptions in this verse, we can make an educated guess about the nature of the flames on the moon. Like the sun, the moon must also be full of flames, because without flames there cannot be illumination. The flames on the moon, however, unlike those on the sun, must be mild and pleasing. This is our conviction. The modern theory that the moon is full of dust is not accepted in the verses of Srimad Bhagavatam. In regard to this verse, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, Sushashpani Sukumala Sikas Tesham Rochisa. The Kusha grass illuminates all directions, but its flames are very mild and pleasing. This gives some idea of the flames existing on the moon. Om Agyanatamarandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nukam Karoti Vachalam Hangam Lagate Garim Yakripatam Hamvande Shri Gurum Dinataranam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Outside the ocean of liquor is another island known as Kusa, which is 800,000 yojanas, 6.4 million miles wide, twice as wide as the ocean of liquor. As Shalmali is surrounded by a liquor ocean, Kusa is surrounded by an ocean of liquid ghee, as broad as the island itself. On Kusa there are clumps of Kusa grass, from which the island takes its name. This Kusa grass, which was created by the demigods by the will of the Supreme Lord, appears like a second form of fire, but with very mild and pleasing flames. Its young shoots illuminate all directions. So, interesting verses. So we could enter into some controversial topics here. But it's only controversial if you don't have faith in Guru Sadhu and Shastra. And this is what it comes down to. There's a saying that if the spiritual master says that if you see something lying and you don't know if it's a rope or a snake, and you think, oh, maybe it's a rope, and the spiritual master says, no, it's a snake, then you don't argue with him, you accept it. And it's said because if you say, no, it's not a snake, it's a rope, then it is a snake, because in the spiritual sense, that snake of doubt, putting our own sense perception above the spiritual master's instructions. So, of course, when it comes to having faith in the spiritual master, this process of Krishna consciousness is it's called the descending process. That doesn't mean to say that we are descending. It means we're accepting higher knowledge, which is descending upon us. So just like a child has faith in his mother and father, and the mother and father teach it how to walk, how to talk, they toilet train it, they get it educated, and basically teach it everything it needs so that it can function in the world. And this, the child knows that the protection, at least it's supposed to anyway, Kali Yuga, who knows, even if the child gets protected by its own parents, sometimes it doesn't even make it out the womb. It doesn't even get that much protection. So this protection, the duty of the parents is to protect and guide the child, and its ultimate duty is that one should be able to deliver one's dependents. So delivering doesn't mean to just say that we make them materially well situated, but actually spiritually we must know what is the goal of life and be able to deliver that goal to the child. Now whether the child takes it up or not, it has its own choice. If the parent does its best to give the child the best knowledge and the best direction and the child doesn't take it, then the parent is not punished for that. So similarly, the disciple, they depend on the spiritual master. So first of all, we have to understand what are the qualifications of a spiritual master and what are the qualifications of a disciple. So it's not just simply that we have to figure out, is someone qualified as a spiritual master? This one's qualified, this one might be, this one's not. First, we also need to see, are we a qualified disciple? If we think, okay, qualified disciple means Panya dosho pahatva subhava prachami tuam dharma samudachita yashresh and nishitam brihitan me shishashtaham shadimam tuam prapanam. So Arjuna, this is his petition to Krishna. Now I'm confused about my duty. I've lost all composure because of miserly weakness. And in this condition, I'm asking you to tell me for certain what is best for me. Now I'm a soul surrendered unto you, please instruct me. So when we come to this point that we realize that there's nothing in this material world that is going to satisfy us, and it's simply a very complicated ruse, it's a very complicated maze, which wherever we turn, it becomes a dead end, then we realize that we need some help from some higher source. If we don't realize that and we think we're just going to do it on our own, then we're going to become frustrated. Even as devotees, we still carry that mood of I am the doer, or that I am in control in some way or another. So our control is there to some degree. It's very little control, but there's so many things happen which are out with our control, which we can't do anything about. So when we come to that point that we want to surrender to a bona fide representative of the Lord, and the spiritual master, that is what he is. He's simply the Lord's ambassador who's coming to say, okay, this is Krishna, this is how you get to Krishna, that's taking you away from Krishna, don't do that. If you want to go to Krishna, you got to avoid this and you got to do this. And you do this like this in this type of mood, not simply that we just do it mechanically. To begin with, we may learn to do things mechanically, and it can be a bit difficult because our second nature is drawn towards sense gratification, and we put a lot of faith in our senses. So this is called Pratyaksha, direct sense perception. So some people, their mood is, if I can't see it, it doesn't exist. But what about the wind? We don't see that, but we see the effect of the wind. We might not see God, but we can see the effect of God, the creation. Otherwise, what is the option? Big Bang. Of course, they'll say, oh, well, who made God? We'll say, well, who made the Big Bang? Who put the infinitely dense, infinitesimal particle there for it to explode or implode or whatever it did? If there was nothing there in the beginning, then why would anything ever come to be? So that is Krishna, the cause of all causes. Sarva Karana Karanam. He's the cause of all causes. So that cause of all causes is a spiritual cause. If we put two dead bodies in a room and you leave it for any amount of time, you never come back later on and find three bodies or any of them become alive again. You might find some insects or maggots or something like that, but There's a very nice book, which is a compilation of lectures of Srila Prabhupada. It's called Life Comes from Life. And this is the existential truth that life comes from life. Life does not come from matter, dull matter. Srila Prabhupada gives a nice example that sometimes it appears that scorpions just manifest of rice. So you may have a big mound of rice. Sometimes when they're harvesting rice, they have it in big warehouses. And sometimes they'll see, okay, there's no scorpions there, but then they'll just come out of it. It's like, well, the rice is just manifest some scorpions, but it's because there's eggs in there. Like sometimes that happens. It's like there's all sorts of insects lying within the body which don't manifest until the body dies, but they were always there just in some kind of seed form. It's not that they just, some kind of chemical thing happened between the rice and the scorpion came out, and the rice is the mum and dad of the scorpion. The eggs were there and the right conditions were there for the egg to hatch. And then we have the scorpion manifesting. So it appears like that. So because we don't see what the cause of that is, we just jump to some conclusion. So therefore, if we have to accept that there's some kind of origin, then we look at the universe, we look at even just this one planet, and we think that everything is just so perfect that if anything was to be adjusted in any small way, in terms of the gravitational force, the amount of oxygen mixture in the air, the amount of heat, etc., wind, lack of, or excess of, any slight adjustment, and then life would not be able to exist here. It's just so perfect. And just because we manufacture some instruments where we can look at planets from afar, then we think, we don't see any life on there, so there's no life on it, and we're looking. There's one person sent me an interesting photograph. It said, isn't it interesting that all attempts to find intelligent life are looking away from the earth? And the thing is, because people don't know what is intelligence, so they don't even know what they're looking for. If you don't know what you're looking for, even if you find it, it will just go right past you. If you don't know what is the value of something, sometimes people have some good fortune, they don't even realize it, and then it's gone. Was it that saying is, you don't know a good thing till it's gone? Sometimes people have a nice relationship, they might take it for granted, or they don't see how good it is, and then they lose it because they take it for granted. We have this human form of life, which is such a good fortune. If we take it for granted, it will slip past us, and then we may regret it. So every second of this human form of life is so valuable. So with this, we may make some instruments like telescopes which can see millions of miles away, and we look through them, but what we're going to look through them with? We're going to look through them with this imperfect eye, with this imperfect brain. What we're going to see? Sometimes when we fall asleep, it's like just sometimes in class, right, devotees fall asleep, and then when they wake up, they realize they're in class, and they thought that they were like hours doing something else, and it's only a minute past. So sometimes the perception of time is it eludes us. You ever get that? You just have a little nod off, and in your dream you think that you're doing something, and it seems like very normal, and the time seems to be quite a long time, but it could be just even a minute or two. So the perception of time is also a very relevant thing, as is the perception of space. So the description of these planets here, these islands and these oceans, etc., we think, well, I haven't seen it in my well. I'm Dr. Frog, and in my well, I've been in this well all my life, and I know everything about it. I'm a professor of this well. I've got a telescope, I've got a microscope. I can see the furthest away parts of the well. I can see the closest parts of the well. I know how deep the water is in the well. I know all the insects and other living entities within the well. And there's nothing beyond that, because this is all there is. This is my whole life experience. And my father and my grandfather, we all lived here, and they never passed down anything higher than this, so this is all there is. We don't see anything else, so there is nothing else. And then one day some frog pops in from outside the well and says, "Oh, who are you?" He says, "I just came from outside the well, but you look just like us." He says, "Yeah, but there's a great world out there. Is it as big as my well?" It's bigger than your well. Is it twice as big? Is it 3 times as big? And he puffs himself up each time and then finally explodes because he cannot conceive. But if the frog was just to come out of his well and just be a little open-minded and realise that perhaps there's things beyond our perception which we cannot see with these material eyes, and perhaps we're not meant to see them because we're not qualified to see them. It's like one time Tama Krishna Maharaj, he gave a lecture, and the devotee said to him, "Can you show me God?" He says, "I can show you God, but are you prepared to qualify yourself to see God?" He says, "So if you stay with me for 6 months, I guarantee," I even said, "I'll give you $10,000 that you chant Hare Krishna for 6 months and you follow these instructions, you will see God." So of course, seeing God doesn't necessarily mean to say that, okay, we chanted Hare Krishna for 6 months in our beads and haven't seen Krishna walk into the room. So that's it, I'm jacking it in. But it's mentioned also that in Kali Yuga, this age of quarrel, the Lord manifests as Nam Avatar, which means he descends in the form of his holy name. So by chanting Hare Krishna, then we actually experience the presence of God through hearing. Our life is transformed. And Srila Prabhupada was so convinced that if everybody just chants Hare Krishna, then all the good qualities will follow. Because Krishna is pavitram, pure, when we associate with Krishna by chanting and by hearing, of course, chanting is called Shravanam Kirtanam. It's not just called Kirtanam. It's not that we just chant and we don't hear. We really have to hear. So we're chanting, we know we're chanting because the words are coming out. At least we get that part right, we're halfway there. But then hearing, that is a real important thing. And Shravanam Kirtanam it's called, so we have to hear first, otherwise we don't know what to chant. And hearing doesn't mean to say just, okay, we've got the words right, and we've got the sequence of the words right. And it also means hearing in what way? Hearing in a prayerful way, hearing with reverence and affection, hearing with some feeling. But generally, Prabhupada, not generally, actually, Prabhupada was not sentimental at all. He said that religion without philosophy is, anybody? Or fanaticism or sentimentality. So religion without philosophy is sentimentality or fanaticism. And philosophy without religion is mental concoction, dry speculation. Same thing, just different words. Mental concoction. So philosophy without religion. So the religion means there has to be some taste, there has to be some juice, there has to be some experience. If we have a philosophy but there's no experience and our life doesn't change, what is the value of the philosophy if our life doesn't improve? If we have a religion and but there's no, of course God is beyond logic, but there at least has to be some logic there for him to be at least that and then beyond. So there has to be some philosophy. Also means way of thinking, a way of living, some code of conduct, etc. Otherwise, there's no guiding principle, and there's no conclusion, there's no reason. So therefore, Prabhupada makes it very simple. He's not against anybody's particular chosen faith or religion. But when you read Srila Prabhupada's books, you realise there's no knowledge beyond this. Even that simple thing, explaining what is the difference between religion and real religion and philosophy and sentimental or fanatical religion. And it's not a matter of labelling one religion sentimental or fanatical, it's a matter of the practitioner. How do we apply it? So even within the Krishna conscious movement, we don't want to be sentimental or fanatic. So we have to both practice the philosophy and understand it, and then we'll get experience. So when we get a little experience, Prabhupada, so he was not sentimental, but one day he was asking the devotees, so how do we know Krishna is God? And most of the devotees know the answer here already. So the devotees were saying, because it says in the Brahma Samhita, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha, Parapapa. So they're firing all these different slokas at him. And he said, anybody could have written that. What if, we just wrote these things? Could have been somebody who just wrote these books. Oh yeah, because you said so. Well, maybe I'm cheating you. No, you would never cheat us. But how would you know? And then, so many other different things they were coming up, because logically this, that, and the next thing. And so maybe your logic is deficient. So anyway, after the Prabhupada had exhausted even all the teachings which he'd given them, this is for the devotees. He says, how do we know? Because we feel it. So we experience it, we experience Krishna's pleasure. How else could we give up all these things which everybody else is doing unless we have a higher taste? Sometimes we think, I'm not rolling on the ground with tears flowing from my eyes like torrents of wave, hair standing on end, floating on air in pure ecstatic love of God, so I'm not getting a taste. We have a taste already. That's why we're able to give up other things. To whatever degree we're able to give up material world, then to that degree we have a higher taste. Paramdrishva. And without that, we would not be able to continue. We see that some people, they can give up externally some of the things which were attached to the material world. But the real work begins when we have to give up the desire. Like Krishna says, one who gives up or renounces objects of the senses, but dwells on them within their mind, deludes himself and is certainly called a pretender. What's the other word for that? The other word for one who's a pretender? Is anyone? Sahaja, that's it. So sometimes we see this at people who they try to profess themselves to be very advanced, but actually, secretly, we're holding on to so many attachments, and we all may have a bit of sahajism in us. We would like to be seen as being more advanced than we are. We might not be going around in a sari with the gopi dots and things, for the men, or I don't know what women sahajas do. Or we might not be faking the ecstatic symptoms, but to some degree or another, we still have an element of perhaps cheating in us, where we would like people to think we're more advanced than we really are. And I think it was Satyananda Maharaj was saying recently in that retreat that we attended that, or was it Purijan Prabhu? He was saying basically we have to have the courage to have a real good look at ourselves and see ourselves in reality. And when we see that, then we know that this is impetus for humility. And from that point, we can make a lot of spiritual advancement. If we're fooling ourselves, then it's hard to make advancement because we're thinking we're already there when we're not. It's like you're on the bus from Lesmahago to Glasgow, but you get off at Lark Hall and you just pretend you're in Glasgow. So for those who are on the bus going to Glasgow think, that guy's nuts, what's he doing? He's got off the bus too early. He needs to get back on, he's not going to get there. He thinks he's in Glasgow because he got some of the same shops. But did you not see the signpost? This is Sahaja town here. He needs to get back on the real one, Goloka. So in this way we follow the footsteps of the previous acharyas, and we see that these previous acharyas are so humble. It's a great mistake to think that they're just doing this to show us, because no, they actually are naturally humble. And humility is not a weakness, it's a strength. It takes a strong, honest person to admit their own faults. And even great devotees, they're humble and they may consider themselves to have some fault, but we don't see that. It's not for us to see that. It's out of their humility. It's not like some, you might hear sometimes Prabhupada saying, I'm rascal number one or something like that, or fool number one. We wouldn't dare to think that that's the case. That's his humility. You can think that we're such a fool, we don't even think we're fool number one. Prabhupada's showing us how we should be thinking ourselves. So with imperfect senses, we can't hear very far, we can't see very far, and even if we use some instrument which we invented, which is somewhat imperfect as well, then what we're going to see with the imperfect senses and imperfect mind and reasoning, so the next way of acquiring knowledge is anumana, following the mind. So we're hypothesizing, because I can't see what I'm used to seeing in my well, then that means there's nothing there. But because we don't even have the material scientific knowledge to understand how other forms of life may exist in other planets, even if their atmosphere seems hostile to our type of living, it's not that everything has to go according to our rules. This is frog in the well type of view on the universe. So to understand these things, we accept it as Shastra, and Prabhupada mentioned it in the purport here that this is our conviction. So sometimes we come across these things which are a challenge. Are we going to take faith in our senses, or are we going to take faith in the higher authority and follow that? And in my own personal experiences, each time you choose to follow the higher authority, then you feel deeper in your connection with Krishna, and you feel more convinced. So this word conviction is coming from the word convince as well. So we're not necessarily convinced simply just by what we see with our material senses, what we can see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, but what we perceive through having faith in Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. So if two people are telling you something, and they're both saying that it's the truth, and you're not quite sure which one it is, how would you know which one to believe?
Well, I was just thinking, maybe not the answer that you're looking for, but I was just thinking there's a pastime where Krishna and so Purnamasi brings all the doubles of the gopis, and then she asks all the town people, can you tell which ones are the real gopis? And at first they can't tell. Even the real gopis don't know if they're the real gopis. They're all looking at them. And then as they look, they see how brightly faced and how much pure love is shining in the eyes of the ones that are the real gopis. And then they immediately say, no, it's those. But maybe that maybe not the right answer for me.
Any other? So there's certainly a hard answer there, which is who do you trust more? If you look at the behavior of somebody, and who would you trust more?
We'll try to check it what the scriptures say and see which is reconciling with the scriptures.
Even by our own personal character, think who's the more trustworthy person? And if the person who's saying that Krishna consciousness is giving all the answers, and that this way of life will lead you to eternal life full of bliss and knowledge, and the person who's giving that is like Srila Prabhupada and those who are coming representing that, if you can see that they're actually living a life which is free from these entanglements of the material world, and they're happy doing it, they're happier, well, they've not got all the things which are supposed to make you happy in the world, and they don't have any of those. So that would say that they must have something of some substance. And it's not just like, oh, everyone in the Hare Krishna movement is just an LSD casualty, or they had too many trips, and therefore they believe that God's a little blue boy because it suits their mental wanderings. Not maybe some casualties ended up like that, but you get them in every walk of life. But there are very intelligent people who have never had these kind of substances. There's people from all walks of life. And so that's it. We have to trust one way or another. It seems to only be two choices. Either life comes from life or life comes from matter. And the evidence shows that life comes from life because both our parents were alive, and so were theirs, and so were theirs, and so were theirs. And even if the scientists want to make some baby in a test tube, they take the elements from a live mum and dad. At least they were alive at one time, if not now. Even if they preserve them, put them together, and they make it. So they're trying to take the credit from God and give it to themselves. Like they call it, such and such laws of this, such and such law of that. But it's not their law. They never created it. They discovered it. It was already there. So who's the lawmaker? It's not Newton's law of this, or Darwin's law, or whatever happens to be. Somebody's named it after themselves, and then they're dead and gone. But it's actually God's law of gravity. No, he didn't even discover it. He created it. So it takes a very intelligent person to try to discover it. What about the person who created it? Okay, so we'll just stop it there if anyone's got any comments or questions. Talk stupid.
I was reading in the Shishnamrita, it's quite interesting last night. There's all different types of religions, and a member of one religion shouldn't decry the others. You shouldn't say, I'm the one that's right, and all these others are wrong. So then we were just reflecting on how we have, we tend to present Krishna consciousness as the best, and the others are not really right. So I was thinking it's more that we have more information. These other faiths and religions are also correct, but what they have, what their understanding is, or the conception of God is much more limited compared to we have an abundance, the treasure house of very direct information, isn't it, about God? So the others are right, but they just don't have a lot of information.
So just in case anyone didn't hear that, we say that we're not necessarily in any other religion. We're saying that just within the Vedic literatures there's a lot more information and direction as how to go further. So just like, for example, in the Bible it says Jesus said the most important commandment is to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind and soul. So that's the same. You'll find the same in the Vedic literature, and you will also find, so there's no contradiction there. It's not that one is right and one is wrong. But then you'll find in the Vedic literature how to do that, what is the process of doing that, what is pravritti, what is nivritti, what is to be accepted, what is to be rejected, what are all the things favourable for achieving that. So there's no contradiction. And so any religion which is teaching how to love God, then that's bona fide religion. If a religion is telling you to avoid that, to avoid God or decry God, then that's not actually religion. It's just some dry philosophy.
There's an online comment already without that name. It says, Hare Krishna, thanks for another thought-provoking lesson and brimming with questions.
Yes, Eamon, thank you for that comment. And this is what Prabhupada's books will do. They will answer so many questions, and they'll also provoke many, many questions. And then as we continue reading them and chanting, then those questions which we didn't even think of, which have been provoked, will be answered as well. So just keep going, and then ultimately the soul is illumined in due course of time, and we realize that all that knowledge which I was looking for was already inside me. And by the association of devotees, following the instruction of the spiritual master and the Vedic literatures, then that helped to remove the coverings of ignorance and reawaken our original pure knowledge. Anything else from anyone that talks to you?
You were saying about people that are. So I really quote that: the weak are cruel, but the strong are able to be gentle. And I was wondering, what is the strength that we need to bear the weight of humility?
What's the strength that you need?
What is the strength that we need to bear the weight of humility?
Actually, humility is not. It's a relief of carrying the heavy burden of pride. I remember years ago, before I'd been driving for a good few years already, and I was somewhat proud of my record that I'd never had a crash. At the same time, it became a burden. I was thinking, oh no, I need to go through my whole life to maintain this pride that I've never had a crash. I need to go through my whole life never having a crash. And when I did have a crash, I was somewhat relieved, because now I don't have to carry that pride any longer. So when our pride is removed, sometimes the spiritual master will do that, and it's actually a great blessing. Spiritual master duties is to chastise the disciple, and it's not just scolding him because he did something wrong, but it's to chasten him to the path of Krishna consciousness, to chasten him to being Krishna's devotee. And it's such like a great relief. Yeah, so the pride is the burden, which we think humility is going to be a burden because we're carrying this burden of pride already. We think, I'm so proud, being humble is going to be such a devastating thing. But it's actually such a relief. But it's not that I'm living it in pure humility, but sometimes you get somebody tells you off and you think, yeah, I really needed that. And Advaita Acharya, he showed us the example as well, that he wanted to be chastised by Lord Chaitanya. Because if someone takes the trouble, obviously it's got to be out of affection and care to put you right, then that's love. If someone's just doing it because you're annoying them, then that's not really this out of love, I'm chastising you because you're a pain in the neck and you're irritating me. So if we have to point some direction to somebody, don't do it just because it's simply irritating you. But do it with deeply thinking of what is the best way to direct this person. And even sometimes we may receive some direction, and it's not that we simply say, well, I don't like the way it was delivered, so I reject it. If we're sincere, we think, so it may have came in not such a nice package, but what is the gift within this? Just like you might receive something through the post, and the parcel's all ripped up, and it's been dropped in a puddle and things, and you think, I'm not opening that, throw it in the bin. You would think, oh, okay, the parcel's damaged, but let's see what's inside it. Maybe that's still okay. So that's our humility, to also want to make advancement. I guess we have to be courageous. And the direction is given in the Nectar of Instruction, where Srila Goswami says that we should reveal our mind in confidence. So it's not necessarily that we'll be humble to everybody, because we're afraid that we may get abused. And therefore we won't apologize to people, or we won't be humble to people, or we're not so keen on taking direction from some people if we think they're hypocrites. So at least we find somebody or some bodies who we actually can put our faith in, who we know has got our eternal well-being at heart. And we can relieve our burden. Even materially speaking, they say a problem shared is a problem halved. But out of pride, sometimes people don't want to face the fact that we have problems. And we all have problems, and we all have pretty much the same problems. We're all living within the same material world, which is affected by the same three modes of material nature, living within a material body which is made of all the same elements. So we're all victims of lust, anger, greed, and these different things. So it's nothing really new. I wanted to make one point actually from the end of the purport here. Prabhupada talks about the flames of the Kusa grass. It's interesting that Kusa or Kush, if you extract oil from it, and we've experienced this in summer. So if you've never been to India in the summer, then you might not experience how hot it can be, but it can be, especially in Vrindavan at Govardhan, it can get up into late 40s and even early 50s. It's considered that it's one of the most hottest inhabited places on earth. Not hottest places, but hottest inhabited places. Sometimes people die from the heat there in the summer. But what they do is they get Kusa oil, or Kush oil, and they put it into water and they drink it and it cools you. So this is the effect of just a little proof of the pudding there, that this Kush, which is considered to be a cool flame, a mild flame, when you extract from that Kusha grass, then it is very cooling. So, yeah, talk to you quick.
Just a random, yesterday, I can't even remember who it was actually. I think it was one of the Prabhupada rallies. Srila Prabhupada was saying that the moon must have cool flames. And it's logic. He said because Narottam Das Thakur says that Lord Nityananda is more cooling than millions of moons. So he said the moon must have fire, otherwise it wouldn't be able to give light. But because Narottam Das Thakur has said that it is cooling like Lord Nityananda, therefore we can conclude. So it was the way it was just reflecting on it. It's interesting how Prabhupada's logic was different than the way a scientist would. His logic was, well, Narottam Das Thakur is saying this, so that must be the case. So therefore, the moon must be cool.
It's this Nitai Padakamala song. It says that Lord Nityananda's his chayai, his shade, his chaya, is more cooling than Koti Chandra, millions of moons. So, I mean, one could get caught up in arguing, the distance between the sun and the moon and the earth and this, that, and the next thing, but really, our main thing is to get out of this material world. And if we have faith in the Shastra, by following this process that we're getting somewhere, then we have faith that we're going to get the rest of the direction. And the rest of the direction is going to take us the rest of the way. Okay, so I think we'll just close there. And we'll continue reading from this chapter tomorrow. Iskon Guruvinda ki, Shri Prabhupada ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande. Gaura Bhaktavinda ki.